Hi, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Today we're going to talk through some beginner to intermediate 18th century clothes if you're interested in taking your muzzleloading to the next step and getting involved in some living history. Just like with anything in muzzleloading, the clothing that we're talking about here varies depending on how far you want to go with it. A lot of people in the contemporary mindset for reenacting push hard for hand sewn and sewing your own clothes, but if you're like me with a young family, the time to do that is really limited and mostly non-existent. So I hope that this provides a nice middle of the road for everybody watching so that if you want to participate in a juried event, you can cross that threshold and participate. Or if you're just wanting to get out and hunt squirrels or deer this fall in 18th century clothes, you can do that as well and be a little more in touch with your ancestors. Generally, we see clothing on a scale from most affordable to most accurate. On the affordable end of things, a lot of times pieces are going to be made in mass from a pattern. We like to see patterns, or we hope to get a piece with a pattern that's taken from an original historic document. It's the way it's going to be the most accurate, and that way, even if it is machine sewn in a modern sense, at least the pattern is cut the same and it should wear very similar. Another term you're going to see used is hand finish, and this is where a garment is primarily sewn with a machine, but the exterior facings of the piece are going to be finished by hand, giving it a more hand sewn look while having the affordability of the machine sewn for the main structure. Fabric quality and accuracy is going to vary, and it's best to do your research when you're looking at purchasing and talk to people and read the forums, read the Facebook groups to get an understanding of what is seen as correct in the contemporary sense. Because what works now might not work in 5 years as research evolves and as we try to understand the past more and more. On the most accurate end of that scale, we have hand-tailored, hand-sewn garments produced by an experienced tailor with measurements taken from you based on patterns pulled directly from original garments. As you can imagine, that's a lot of man hours and that's a lot of time, so that most accurate end also comes with a price tag to make all that happen. Today I'm doing my best to share a little bit of a middle ground here, to give you some options that are affordable and accurate so you can get started on the right foot. Today I'm laying out a set of 1770s era American Revolutionary War era clothing. It's not cheap, but it's as accurate as I think you can get at the time of recording while buying off the shelf. Again, trying to make this as accessible as possible. None of the recommendations in this video are sponsored. I'm organizing this based on my past 5 years of research and discussion. Right off the bat, I'm recommending a trouser or a full pant here. Linen is king when it comes to historic accuracy. The colored canvas that we see in the modern reenacting world gives you a nice splash of color, but when it comes to historic accuracy, plain Jane linen is the way to go. I have a near ancient pair from the Ohio peddler who has since retired, but vendors like Townsend's, Samson Historical, and South Union Mills offer a great line of men's trousers for you to get into that are affordable. In the research-focused reenacting group, the South Union Mills Excelsior linen trousers continue to be recommended, and right now they're retailing for $189. Next, you'll need a shirt, and by far the recommendation is a plain white, accurate pattern 18th century linen shirt. You can get this from South Union Mills, you can get this from Townsend's, you can get this from Samson Historical. Again, in the research-based, progressive reenacting space, the South Union Mills is a really popular brand, but in looking at the Townsend's and the Samson Historical, they're a great option too. The third part of this base structure for your clothing is going to be your shoes. Period footwear stinks in comparison to modern footwear. Believe me, I'm on my feet all day. I don't want to be on my feet all day in my colonial buckle shoes, but that's really the prevailing point for footwear is a good pair of colonial buckle shoes. If you're working on a backwoods impression, hand-sewn moccasins are the way to go, or another option to have. But again, that creates another barrier of time, materials, and skill level. So focusing on our affordable and accessible vein here, I've got the South Union Mills Colonial Buckle shoes on this list. Prevailing, these are a very popular shoe that gets recommended all the time. It's the pair of shoes that I went with, and I've enjoyed using them myself. But again, I hear great things about the Townsend's Colonial Buckle shoes. They've been around forever. The base shoe itself is going to start around $170 for the South Union Mills shoes at the time of recording. And then you're going to have another $50 or so on top of that with a pair of buckles. So for my South Union shoes, I have the South Union Mills shoes, and then I have a pair of plain Jane brass buckles for the shoes from Townsend's. Looking back on it, I should have gone with a little bit of a more ornate buckle for those shoes, because we see in the time period those buckles being a sign of wealth. And even if you were a poor backwoodsman, you know, homesteading pioneer on the fringe of society, those buckles were kind of an asset for you. And Nathaniel Kobuck has talked about, I can't remember the name, but somebody losing their shoes because of an attack on their camp and going back to get the buckles off of their shoes because they were made of a precious metal. So that's something to consider here. Where I went for, I think, the $35 pair of buckles, I should have saved my money a little bit longer and gone for a more ornate set of buckles, even though I'm not portraying an elite royalty for the period. And then for men in this period, it's really important that you have a neckerchief tying or closing the top of your shirt in. In talking with living historians and reenactors and researchers, by far the first name that comes up all the time when talking about neckerchiefs is going to be Burley and Trowbridge. They have a great line of neckerchiefs that are based on historical patterns and historical prints and historic colors. I really like what we're seeing now of getting away from some of the drab in some places. It makes sense for hunting, of course, but at events where we have, you know, a fort being occupied or a large encampment happening, it's great to see these handkerchiefs or neckerchiefs or neckties with a bright splash of color, and Burley and Trowbridge offers a great variety of those neckerchiefs for a variety of periods. So it's important when looking at something like a neckerchief that's going to kind of top off your outfit a little bit. We're talking about just having plain linen and black shoes. This is the opportunity for you to have a little bit of personalization and a splash of color to your outfit with that neckerchief. So read the product descriptions on Burley and Trowbridge neckerchiefs and make sure you're getting one correct for the period that you're trying to portray, because they have some for pre-American War for Independence, they have some for the American Civil War, and they have a variety for the American War for Independence. As with all of these items, it's important to try to make sure that there is proper documentation for the item, for the pattern, for the colors, for the period. Burley and Trowbridge isn't the only one that offers these neckerchiefs. They're just a popular recommendation. And if you're looking to get this kind of base suit all from one vendor if you can to save on shipping, South Union Mills, Townsend's, and Sampson Historical, as well as a variety of other vendors, offer similar neckerchiefs. But Burley and Trowbridge, I believe, offers the widest variety at the time of recording. The Burley and Trowbridge handkerchiefs start around $50 with shipping. Hats. Hats are super important for the time period, and it's important, especially if you're going to be out and about at an event, that you have a head covering of some kind. It's just very common in the documentation, it's very common in the period, so having some kind of head covering is important. The most common head covering that you're going to see is a felt or wool felt brimmed hat. And based on contemporary research, we're starting to see more and more evidence of a narrow brimmed hat for the time period. I recommend the narrow brimmed hat because you can purchase a wool felt or a felt hat blank for around $100, and you can modify that hat depending how you see fit. The easiest thing to do for you is to take that hat blank and trim the brim to turn it into a narrower hat. The Deerskin Diary gives a great talk where he mentions hats, and he mentions the documentation declaring that the hat brims were usually 3.5 to 4 inches wide. And it seems narrow, and it seems like you're throwing away a lot of that hat blank, but if you're looking to wear it uncocked, I think it's the way to go. If you trim that hat down, like I have done, you'll notice that you have a different look, a much different look, and it gives you more visibility when you're looking up in the woods. A lined hat is more accurate, and I think lining your hat gives you a great first sewing project because it's a hidden piece of sewing that nobody will ever see, and it's something that can help you modify your more affordable hat blank into a more accurate hat without the cost of paying a hatter to do that, if you can't afford to do that at this time. You can class up your hat blank two other ways. You can add a nice ribbon for a splash of color. Consider the color of your handkerchief and maybe some color coordination. If you're into that, you can look up some basic color theory online about what colors look to get good together, or you can just pick the ones you like. Another way to class up your hat is to leave the brim a little longer and turn it into a cocked hat yourself. We're starting to rack up the cost here. I don't want you to be intimidated. but we're heading towards a jacket of some kind, which is going to be a little bit more expensive. I recommend that you start with what we've covered so far: the pants, the shirt, the neckerchief, the hat. Shoes, depending on the event, you can get by with a nice pair of chukka boots and a pair of garters or a pair of leggings made out of wool broadcloth. But again, that creates some additional cost. It's better if you can, based on the contemporary mindset here, to save up for those proper shoes when you can and get out with them. That being said, if you can't afford the shoes and you're focusing on the pants, the shirt, the hat, and everything else, it's okay for the shoes to be last. The big thing really with any late 18th century impression is going to be a jacket of some kind. Jackets, as research continues to evolve, are becoming increasingly important. I'm told that unless one was doing manual labor, the plain white shirt was rarely an outer garment. Based on recent product releases from a few companies, there are two leading options here for your jacket. The first is going to be the South Union Mills hunting shirt, coming in at $269. This is a great shirt for frontier or backwoods impressions, but it's not seen before the late 1770s. That's an important detail. The hunting shirt, as we see it come into the American War for Independence or the American Revolutionary War, it was not really seen before then. So if you're at an event that is pre-1770s, pre-late 1770s, that hunting shirt doesn't necessarily fit in. If you're portraying American Revolutionary War on, that hunting shirt fits in and is a great option, especially for a backwoods militiaman, pioneer, homesteader impression. The other option that's come out this year is the Samson Historical late 18th century frock. This comes in at right around $400. It's more expensive, but it is classier than the hunting shirt. And while it's classier in how we look at things now, for the period, this is a very common kind of jacket to have regardless of your class or stature. Generally, based on the research I've done and discussions I've had, as always, this is a very common jacket for the period, and unless you were the lowest of the low, as Townsend's talk about a lot, you would have a jacket like this in some manner. And what I really like about it is the fit is very accurate for the period. It's snug. I purchased one of these myself with my own money, not sponsored, and it's a very different kind of jacket than the other jackets I've worn before. The design and the pattern of it keeps your shoulders back. And I mean, it kind of forces you into good posture as you're standing. It's a tight fit. It's not something that I'm going to go chop wood in, but I still have enough range of movement that I think I could go hunting with it feasibly if I wanted to pick briars and stick tights out of it all weekend. But it's something that I feel like I could still have the range of movement to go out to a camp, trek, or hunt with it, be historically accurate, but have a little bit of a different look than a hunting shirt. The thing about the Samson Historical late 18th century frock is you do have to take some measurements for yourself to submit. They have a line of these that are made off the shelf, off of kind of average measurements for different sized people, but if you're like me, I have really wide shoulders for the rest of my body. Mine took a little bit longer to get produced because I did have to submit my measurements a couple times to get it right. As always with all of these clothing options, what I'm presenting here isn't comprehensive, it isn't everything. This is just what I've seen being discussed from events that are very loose to events that are very tight as acceptable for their events. This isn't going to get you into every single event out there, but this list of clothing is going to get you into 95% of events out there. The last thing I want to talk about is glasses or eyewear, because it's very tricky if you're like me and you're blind as a bat. Without your lenses, it's important to have some glasses. The easy way out is to wear contacts. It fits, nobody knows. And if you're out on a trek or hike, you can pop your contacts case into your kit and it's not a big deal. But I don't like touching my eyeballs, so I've got to wear glasses. In the past, I've gotten by with a $20 pair of brass framed glasses from Zenni Optical. You can just order them online. Super cheap, super easy, but they did have the modern nose pad and they weren't quite the right shape for the 18th century. Jason Gatliff at Muzzleloader magazine and I were talking about glasses for the period, and he helped me find these faux horn-rimmed glasses that I was able to pick up for around 60 bucks shipped. These cheapo $60 glasses look a lot like a pair of $500 real horn rimmed glasses that we see other reenactors using. I just can't afford that right now. I'm sure those glasses are great, but for me, the $60 option to get into a pair of faux horn rimmed glasses that are just about the right size and diameter, but the right profile, has allowed me to step up my look without spending, as much as my entire outfit on a pair of glasses that I'm going to wear a few weeks out of the year. This pair of glasses in particular is shipped from China, but I will say the quality is acceptable and the prescription was spot on. That was my main worry, is that the prescription would be off after waiting a few weeks for them to be delivered, but they were spot on. No complaints there. In contemporary living history, there's a term that gets spread around a lot, and that is common use. I made this video with common use in mind. When you pair all of these items together, you're going to get a very common look. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing that's going to make you look like the main character of an 18th century movie. But it works, it's cohesive, it's accurate, and it's nice. The recommendation I've given you are serious quality items. They're not going to fall apart in a week. They're not cheapo. I understand this is expensive. This is not something that most of us can just jump right into right away. But it's the kind of thing that I hope that you can use this outline to begin saving and purchasing an item every month or every quarter or every year, if you have to slowly build your kit and for it to be representative of the period, to be a quality item that you can go out and use, seriously use, and you can get out and have some fun. With this outline, you can get out to a late 18th century event and look good, but you won't feel good until you wear the garments for a while and get used to them. Nathan Kobuck told me that you don't want to look like you're in a costume. You need to be comfortable in these clothes to look the part. I like to garden, do yard work, or hunt in my clothing to break it in without abusing it. I don't want or need these clothes to look like they're the only pair of clothes that I've had for 10 years, but I want to make sure that I'm comfortable in them, and that's something that takes time. In closing, I want to say that all of this stuff has changed a lot, even in my lifetime. My family got started in muzzleloading early on, but living history in the early 2000s, and clothing has changed a lot since then. When I got started, the base level of clothing for you was a pair of knickers, a shirt and a waistcoat, and maybe a hat. And that's what you saw a lot of us running around in that time period, in the early 2000s. That was the starter kit. But research has changed a little bit. And it's not to say you can't still start with that line of stuff. A lot of people still are. I just present this as an alternative starting point based on some of the things that I've seen again and the discussions that I've had for maybe a more accurate getting started point, jumping off point for the late 18th century. I hope that it's been useful. I hope that it's not just been me blabbing at you about stuff you don't care about or understand. And I seriously hope that it gives you a chance and gives you a little list to start working towards. And I hope to see you out on the trail or at an event because it's a lot of fun. You're going to meet people that are really incredible, some of the best people ever, and you're going to make lifelong friends doing it. As always, I'll have a list in the video description for you to check out, as well as at ilovemuzzleloading.com, where you can check these things out, start saving. I'm hoping to have this out a little bit in time for Christmas, so maybe if you've been good, you can put some of this stuff on your list to Santa, and he can bring it in for you. Once again, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments or shoot me an email at ilovemuzzleloading@gmail.com. I've been very busy with the coffee shop the past few months, but I'm still making time as much as I can to respond to as many comments and questions and produce videos as I can. It's 6:30 now as I wrap up recording, and I'm about to go pick up a grocery delivery for the coffee shop. Trying to fit this stuff in when I can, so thank you so much for sticking around. I hope this was useful. If you have the time, consider coming out to my historic trekking event the first weekend in November here in 2024 at the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association Primitive Range. It's for all skill levels, all gear levels. You can come in your bib overalls or your blue jeans in a modern tent. I don't care. Historic garb and equipment is encouraged, but I want it to be an event where everybody can come and learn. I'll have more details at ilovemuzzleloading.com for you to check out. Once again, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.